everybody. This video follows on in a way from a previous piece that I did about working in black and white and working light from darkness, and you'll see that on my channel, the YouTube channel. I think it's called working on a dark ground, the importance of working light in a dark background. But really what I want to focus on here is the relationship between tone and color. And it's something that we sometimes ignore when we're trying to mix color and think about color. We think only about color. Whereas if you realize that tones, light, dark, grays, blacks, they relate to color and they affect color in a way. The second part of the video, the second aspect of the video, is to get us to think about a term called Grisaille, which is working in greys, blacks and whites. It was a technique used by the old masters. Initially, it was created to recreate sculpture. What I mean by that was that at one point, people who could afford to get sculptures made of themselves or of their family or whoever or whatever could pay for that, but sculptures were very expensive. And what happened was then that painters could make paintings that looked like sculpture, which weren't as expensive, so those who maybe didn't have quite so much money could still have something that was a sculpture, maybe a religious sculpture or whatever, in the form of a painting. So the paintings looked like sculpture simply because they were produced in black and white and shades of grey. But developing on from that, artists then began to see that if you apply thin glazes of color on top of those black and white paintings, you would create beautiful ranges of tone and color and subtleties of color, because the black, white and grey underneath was shining up through and having an influence on the colors that were being put on. So what we have here is just simply a series of grey stripes from black to white. This is some acrylic paint that I've used, so very simple piece of card with these variations of tone from black to white. And we talked about this relationship between colour and tone. So obviously there are three main things that colour can do, or things we can do with colour. One is we can make it lighter or darker, of course. We can make it brighter or darker. We can make it warmer or colder. So we talk about temperature, so it can be a warmer color like red or a colder color like blue. We can, and the variations in between that. And we can also saturate it or desaturate it. It can be very highly charged or very dull, very grey or very rich. So when we look at these shades of grey, what we'll notice is that grey through to black will vary colours in all of those ways, in a sense, because as we introduce colour to this, what we hope we will see is that obviously the colour gets darker. Then the colour will also become colder, cooler as we run across this way. And it will also become less rich. So as we move from here to here, the colour will be more desaturated, duller, greyer, obviously. So the use of greys varies all of these elements within a colour. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to simply introduce a glaze over this. Again, it's acrylic paint because it's pretty convenient for this purpose, because it dries quite quickly. But it will be a reasonably heavy layer of paint, diluted very slightly. But I'm going to use, in this case, a lemon yellow. Now I'll just show you here. That is a little sample of the colour I'm about to use. So you can see, obviously, the difference between that incredibly vibrant yellow and the subtleties of the grey behind it. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to mix some of this yellow up slightly, as I say, slightly diluted, but not too much. And I'm simply going to apply it right over the top of this whole piece of card here. So I may go over the top of it, over the edges of it, I should say, but that should not be a problem. Get that blend it all the way across. Now, usually we can see the results pretty quickly, because with acrylic sometimes what it requires is a little time to dry back in. So what I'm going to do is maybe give this time to dry back in, but even at this point in time you can probably begin to see what's happening. We can begin to see even now yellow on white, of course, remains yellow, that vibrant lemon. Then we move down here. You can see the subtleties. We're turning green, of course, because yellow is becoming cooler as we go down the line. And therefore, as it becomes cooler, it moves more to the blue end of the spectrum. And obviously, blue into yellow gives us green. So it shifts yellow across to the green end of things. But as I say, what I'm going to do here is to allow this acrylic just to dry properly, so that the sheen, if you like, dries off it and it's a little bit easier to see. We'll give that a few seconds and we'll come back and have a look at it again. Okay, so this has dried a little bit now, and we can see slightly more clearly that the range of greens that have appeared. So as you remember, I simply used this particular yellow here across the whole thing, and of course the influence of the greys underneath. You can see that the colors become darker, obviously, all the way across, but they also become less saturated, duller, and so on, and they become cooler. So the yellower, warmer end of greens is up here, the lemon end, and as we move down here, there's a blueness and a coldness that happens as we come right to the end, at the far end here. I've just moved this piece of card around so that it's vertical now, simply because some people recently have been talking to me about colour mixing, in particular in relation to greens and maybe in landscapes. So I thought I would turn that around to create, if you like, a landscape format, stripes going across this way. And really what it does is emphasise the subtlety of greens in the landscape. Now, I'm not suggesting that this is the only green you'll ever get in the landscape, but what I'm trying to say is an awful lot of people still fall into this range when they try to mix greens for grass, for example. They tend to fall up here. That's usually because they have the word green in their head, that grass is green, so I must find green. Whereas if we observe grass and landscapes and trees and so on, we will realize that probably most of the colors that we see that we call green are down here somewhere. And these are the sort of subtle, muddy colors that we're probably more likely to see than up here, which is a very rare occurrence. Okay, so having made the first little exercise using lemon yellow across greys, I thought, and since I'm having so much fun doing it, I have another little sheet of grey strips here, and I thought this time what might be interesting is to use another type of yellow. So the previous yellow was lemon. This is cadmium yellow. You can see here, if I hold it over that, cadmium yellow is if you like, a more orangey yellow. You can see that if I compare it to the yellow that I had in this. So there's the yellow, the lemon yellow, there's the cadmium yellow. So you can see quite a difference there. So what I'd like to do is apply that to this series of grey stripes. So I'll do exactly the same thing as I did before, pretty much just across the whole thing. Just not too dilute. And again, with acrylic, it should dry fairly quickly. I know at the moment it shines a little bit under these lights. So I'll do the same thing again and give it a minute or two to dry. And then we'll come back to that also. So sorry about that. Okay, so we'll let that dry and come back to that in a few seconds. So here we are. We have the two sheets of card that I produced. The first one here, which is with lemon yellow applied on top of greys. Second one here with cadmium yellow applied on top of greys. And when we see them together, the first thing is we see that there's this beautiful range of greens. The greens that are available, if you like, to us are amazing. And that is only based on the use of this colour and this colour. That's the only paints that I used on top of the previously painted grey strips. I think what this proves is the importance of using greys and even blacks, and the importance of draining colour out of other colours, and the usefulness of thinking about dark and light firstly and then applying colour later on. This method can be used with oil paints, of course, acrylics, and even watercolours. Any colour, and most colours are transparent, so therefore colours below will shine through. But it's a beautiful way to begin to understand how colours vary in terms of brightness, in terms of their temperature, and in terms of their saturation. You can see it in the cadmium yellow version that I did, say the second one. You can see again as we move here, even bordering on rusty browns, perhaps gold colours, right through to that cooler green, right down to these deeper greens here. And yet look at the difference between that green and that green, and this green and that green. So not one of these greens is anywhere alike any other. And if you think about it, we could do more strips of grey covered with other types of greens and blues and reds and any other colour. And within each of those, there will be all of these beautiful subtle variations. So I would urge you to try this exercise and practice it within your own painting if you like. Okay, folks, so hopefully that very, very simple exercise has encouraged you to think about the relationship between tone and colour and the subtleties that colour is capable of. Also, it might encourage you to think about just painting in black and white and grey for a period of time. Make some paintings where you take colour out of the picture literally and focus on form and so on, and then introduce colour later on. Hopefully it also has made you aware of the fact that this is a method of thinking that's been around for many years, and it's something people tend to ignore. One of the reasons is actually because with Impressionism in the late 19th century, when painters began to go outside and paint quite quickly because of what they wanted to capture, which was all about sunlight and the spontaneity of everything, they then began to work with thick paint and mixed colour and tone as they went, rather than working in quite the same systematic layering way that previous artists would have. So we're very influenced by that. These days, a lot of classes and a lot of videos that you'll see use that Impressionist method because it's quick and it can be quite impressive, and that's fine, but I think it's important to understand the fundamentals of transparency and tone and colour also. So please do have a go at these exercises, and they'll definitely be a benefit to you.